Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 16 of Spy Family. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So we sort of start with this, I think, kind of a foreboding shot of the clock. And the idea here is that Yor has been coming home late at night. And while Lloyd hasn't really been prying into it, as a spy, I feel like this is something he should kind of be on alert for. I mean, at this point, nobody really seems too on edge about anything. For all we know, this could just be Yor doing her usual business, but, that's not exactly a good thing either. Just sort of looking at what they're saying, it doesn't seem like it, but everybody's being kind of guarded in how they interact, It seems like the main conflict is going to be internal rather than external. Everyone's having all sorts of misgivings, and it seems like Bond is doing his usual thing of giving a grim portent of things to come. I can only imagine that Anya, now knowing what's going on, is going to feel the need to sort of rectify things. Whether or not it's true, she no doubt feels that the family as a whole is at risk. Unfortunately, Yor feels the same way. Now, normally, this whole thing would give the idea that perhaps Yor's work is coming home with her a little bit more than it probably should. But I get the feeling that it's going to be a bit of a little switcheroo here. I mean, of course, I do know, having read the manga and being up to date with it. And, they really are going quite a ways to paint this as, Yor's just going to do her, actual job here and kill a couple people. But I think it's kind of notable to point out that sort of the usual conflict with Yor is that she doesn't feel she's a particularly good housewife. And one of the areas that I believe has already been established as being in need of the most work is that she's a rather terrible cook. Now, it's interesting that she would come to this particular acquaintance for help. If you'll recall, I believe it was the first episode where she basically tried to break up Yor's fledgling relationship with Lloyd by insinuating she had a rather, tawdry and untoward job, to put it mildly. Oh, so this is interesting. She's actually worried about the whole excuse Lloyd came up with. That was just a lie. But, man, it's kind of sad that it's having actual ramifications and that she blames herself. Man, Yor really is in an unfortunate position where nobody is really willing to help her until basically Camilla's boyfriend throws her under the bus. I mean, she's not willing to do it, but I seem to recall her boyfriend was a pretty decent guy in the first episode too, where he sort of tried to regulate the worst aspects of her character. I mean, at the very least, she's willing to go along with things after being goaded into it. Oh, the plot's getting real thick. I forget that, I think that was already alluded to before, that Camilla's boyfriend was, related by means of employment to Yuri. Yeah, so this web is getting real complex here, because, nobody really knows, I don't think, exactly the extent of Yuri's connections with the state, being a secret police officer and all. I mean, Camilla's boyfriend might know, considering they're co-workers, I believe. Or maybe they were just friends after all. Because I feel like inviting over a spook to taste food is, I don't know, a waste of resources. Especially considering how Yor cooks, If the idea here is that she gave her husband such bad food poisoning that he was indisposed for a whole day, it wouldn't be good to food poison a secret police officer. So unfortunately, I think Yor's problem is one of enthusiasm. She's a little too enthusiastic with all of the bladed implements. Although I find it interesting that she managed to carve up herself with the potato peeler, but not with any of the actual knives. I mean, I guess that comes along with the job. I feel like maybe some of this culinary carnage could be avoided if you really just, take things slow, and rather than, slicing up her hands and slicing up a cutting board, you really just take things slow, slowly cut the meat or whatnot. So this is an interesting position, because Camilla is obviously not a particularly good person, but she's trying to be helpful. And Yuri is in a position where I don't think he particularly wants Yor and Lloyd to be married. So I feel like if ever this were an opportunity to get them to split up, this would be it. But at the same time, if the situation was really as Yor thought it to be, that her cooking could lead to a divorce, I feel like that vile thing she just produced would probably seal the deal beyond all reasonable doubt. There's no helping her. So Yuri, always the dutiful brother, can't help himself. He has to eat it no matter how much it inflames his internal organs. I mean, I feel like at least Yuri had a bit of an advantage over Camilla in that he was used to all that growing up, so he's probably built up a resistance to the toxins. Oh, Yuri. It's like, hey sis, is there any more food? I'd like seconds. Oh dear. So it seems to me that maybe Camilla is making a bit of a mistake here by starting off with more complicated dishes. I feel like, you really have to crawl before you can walk, before you can run. I mean, I'm not a good cook by any means, but when I was teaching myself how to cook, I started small, like little things, a couple ingredients, maybe like a little chopping vegetables here, maybe cooking a little something there. But like minestrone, meatballs, like that takes some significant preparation if you're doing it traditionally, which I assume they are. Man, I feel like this explains a lot about Yuri. He doesn't remember what his mother's cooking was actually like, so he can sort of stomach this otherwise inedible stuff just because he doesn't know any better. So it seems like when Camilla's just sort of like standing right over her shoulder and breathing down her neck, she's sort of, I don't know, kind of getting the hang of it. Granted, she's really just making soup stock. Like, I don't know, I've never made soup stock, but I imagine it's probably not too hard, Like, you put stuff in boiling water, you simmer it, you don't let stuff burn. Wow, that's a left-handed compliment if I've ever heard one. This actually smells good, and it's the first thing that does. This might be alright. Man, notably, he's getting somebody else to try it first, so I guess he doesn't have that much faith. So I wasn't exactly expecting this to be like a super intense culinary episode, but I don't know, based on what I know, it seems like all the stuff they're saying is kind of sound. I wonder if they actually consulted like a cook about this or something like that, or a chef, rather. Speaking of chefs and stuff like that, that little scene where they sort of like tried the stew and then gasped, that almost reminds me of Ratatouille, when the food critic tastes the ratatouille and he remembers being a kid. I wonder if they had like a little similar thing there, but they didn't show it in full detail. So, Lloyd, ever being the pragmatic spy, he's really taking advantage of how smart Bond is to decide to sort of make him a guard dog. I feel like he's kind of wimpy for that, he seems pretty docile, but I mean, a big dog is not something you can just ignore entirely out of hand. So on the one hand, Yor has some newfound confidence in her cooking abilities, and to be fair, Lloyd and Anya are right to be afraid. But at the same time, given that the stew actually looks kind of promising, maybe they should approach it sort of cautiously optimistic, rather than prepared to have intestinal distress. Man, isn't that just a good sign when you're prepared to eat your final meal and then die? I mean, fortunately, all of Yor's hard work has really come together. I think some of it might have to do with the recipe, given that, at least in part, it's sentimental to her. Well, there we have it. It looks like the future came to pass, whether it was under the circumstances we imagined or not. So I think this is really heartwarming. This little passage right here where yours basically talking about like just seeing them enjoy the food is a fulfilling thing. And I think there's something to that. Like I think there are a lot of ways to have fulfillment in life, and taking care of your family can certainly fill that role. Oh dear. Yeah, we can't just can't have true progression, as it were. Yor has to cook up something deadly every now and then. So, it's been a while. We haven't seen Frankie, and most assuredly, he's up to no good. Obviously, he wants Lloyd's help for something slightly disreputable. Ah, poor Frankie. He just needs romantic advice. And I feel like Lloyd is really just not treating Frankie too well. I mean, Frankie does kind of deserve it sometimes, but just throw the guy a bone. He needs a W in his life. So Frankie seems to have used his information gathering skills to gather a bunch of information. Oh, dear Frankie. It's not going to help you with the ladies at all if you just sort of learn every detail about them before talking to them. Man, Frankie... Ah, poor guy. Like, he's going out of his way to go to a cigar store that he doesn't even enjoy smoking just to see the girl. Like, he's got it bad. So I have to wonder what Lloyd's gonna do. Surely he's gonna have to, like, play wingman to him or something. Frankie... Like, he's not unsavory, but, like, he's a little uncouth. I feel like Lloyd's gonna have to talk him up or something. So, unfortunately, Lloyd has taken a rather odd approach. He's written out, like, this gigantic flowchart for what Frankie should say in any given circumstance based on what she says. Like, this is obviously the wrong approach. I feel like this is really just sort of devolving into the blind leading the blind. Lloyd might know in theory and in terms of spy work, but doing it sincerely, I feel like he doesn't really know either. Ah, boy, here we go. Master of Disguise Lloyd, dressing up as the girl Frankie likes, just to practice. Man, there's no way this could backfire, right? She's not gonna walk by the cafe window and see her literal doppelganger. Ah, Frankie, don't get your hopes up, man. I feel like Frankie's taking this way, way too seriously. He's gonna get himself in trouble, isn't he? Oh, no. So they just sort of like cut to the next day. I feel like they're gonna find Frankie down and out, like drowning his sorrows or something. Oh dear. Anya's gonna just rub salt in the wound, I can imagine. Well, it seems like she fed him an obvious lie, but at least he seems to be in high spirits about it. uh, oh man, Anya can see right through him. Poor Frankie. Alright, so if the bartender's giving him an expensive drink, surely somebody bought it for him. I mean, it would have to be Lloyd, you know. You know, it's nice that even if he doesn't particularly seem to like Frankie, he's willing to at least, you know, commiserate with him. On the other hand, I feel like maybe leaving Yor in charge of watching Anya is not necessarily a good idea, but oh well. So, you know, it hasn't come up too frequently, but I feel like Lloyd is protesting a little bit too much. You know, there's going to come a time when he stops rationalizing things as being for the mission. Alright, well, that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.